They called him dangerous. They called him radical. They called him one of the most feared black men in America. But Malcolm X wasn't born with a raised fist. He was born with questions, and the answers he found would change the course of history. Wait till you hear how a man once known as Detroit Red became a global symbol of resistance. Malcolm X was born Malcolm Little on May 19, 1925, in Omaha, Nebraska. His early life was shaped by chaos and racism. His father, Earl Little, was a Baptist preacher and an outspoken supporter of black nationalist Marcus Garvey. Because of this, the family was constantly harassed by white supremacists, especially the Ku Klux Klan and the Black Legion. One night, men from the KKK smashed their windows and threatened them. The family fled Omaha, but danger followed them. In 1931, Malcolm's father was found dead, officially ruled a streetcar accident, but many believe he was murdered by white supremacists. Malcolm was only 6. The trauma of losing his father was compounded when his mother, Louise, struggled to keep the family together. She eventually suffered a mental breakdown and was institutionalized. Malcolm and his siblings were split into foster homes. This was a critical moment. Young Malcolm, who once dreamed of being a lawyer, began to lose faith in the system. A teacher once told him being a lawyer wasn't a realistic goal for a black person. That comment crushed him and confirmed a truth he would later speak about often, that America was built to deny black people ambition, dignity, and power. As a teenager, Malcolm moved to Boston to live with his half-sister, Ella. There, he transformed. He slicked back his hair, wore zoot suits, and started going by Detroit Red because of his reddish hair and his time spent in Detroit. He got involved in crime, running numbers, dealing drugs, even burglary. But here's where the story shifts dramatically. In 1946, at just 20 years old, Malcolm was arrested and sentenced to 10 years in prison for burglary. Prison could have been the end of him, but it became the beginning. Inside, he discovered books, philosophy, history, religion, and perhaps most importantly, he discovered the teachings of Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. The nation taught that black people were the original people of the world, that white people were a race of devils created to oppress, and that true freedom could only come through separation from white society, not integration. Malcolm dropped his surname Little, which he called his slave name, and replaced it with an X, symbolizing the unknown name of his African ancestors. When he was released from prison in 1952, he was no longer Detroit Red. He was Malcolm X. He rose quickly within the Nation of Islam, becoming one of its most powerful ministers and spokespeople. His charisma was unmatched. His speeches were fiery, uncompromising, and electrifying. He had a voice that could cut through the noise, and he used it to expose America's hypocrisy. While the mainstream civil rights movement was preaching nonviolence and integration, Malcolm X was saying, "We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. Plymouth Rock landed on us." He accused white liberals of being just as dangerous as Southern racists. He mocked Martin Luther King Jr.'s philosophy of passive resistance, calling it naive and even cowardly. By any means necessary, he would say, 3 words that would echo for generations. But here's where things get complicated. Wait till you hear what happened behind the scenes of the Nation of Islam. Malcolm's growing fame created tension within the nation. He was bringing in new members by the thousands, appearing on television, debating politicians, speaking at universities. He became bigger than the nation itself. Then came a betrayal. Malcolm discovered that Elijah Muhammad, whom he revered almost as a prophet, had secretly fathered multiple children with teenage secretaries, violating the moral teachings he preached. Malcolm confronted him. The fallout was inevitable. After publicly criticizing Muhammad and hinting at disillusionment, Malcolm was suspended and eventually left the nation entirely in March 1964. He feared for his life, and he was right to. But this is also when Malcolm X evolved. He made the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, and it changed everything. In Mecca, he saw Muslims of all races praying together. Whites who weren't racist. Brotherhood beyond color. When he returned, he was no longer the separatist who believed all white people were devils. He founded a new organization, the Organization of Afro-American Unity, inspired by African independence movements and the vision of a global Black consciousness. He started preaching a more inclusive message, though still militant in tone. He called for human rights, not just civil rights. He saw the Black struggle in America as part of a worldwide movement against oppression and colonialism. And yet, he was a marked man. The Nation of Islam branded him a traitor. The FBI watched his every move. He was trailed, threatened, and targeted. His house was firebombed while he and his family were inside. They barely escaped. On February 21, 1965, Malcolm X stood before an audience at the Audubon Ballroom in New York City. He had just begun to speak when chaos erupted, a disturbance in the crowd. 3 men rushed the stage. Shots rang out. Malcolm X was struck 21 times. He died at age 39. The suspects were members of the Nation of Islam. But to this day, questions remain about how much the FBI or NYPD may have known, or even allowed to happen. The full truth is still tangled in redacted files and sealed reports. In the days after his death, some tried to paint him as a dangerous extremist, but others saw him as a prophet, a truth-teller, a man who had the courage to change his mind publicly and to die for what he believed in. Malcolm X once said, "A man who stands for nothing will fall for anything." He stood against racism, against hypocrisy, against silence. And here's the thing, his influence only grew after his death. His autobiography, co-written with Alex Haley, became a global bestseller. His speeches became gospel for generations of Black activists. His face appeared on murals. His words echoed in hip-hop, in classrooms, in courtrooms. Even critics eventually had to admit Malcolm X forced America to look in the mirror. He lived multiple lives in one. Orphan, hustler, prisoner, minister, revolutionary, martyr. And yet, he's still often misunderstood. Because Malcolm X didn't just challenge racism, he challenged comfort. He didn't want to make people feel good, he wanted to make them wake up. His speeches remained lightning in a bottle, unapologetic, unforgiving, unrelenting. He said, "The future belongs to those who prepare for it today." And today, we still prepare, because Malcolm X made sure we never forget where we came from, what we're up against, and how powerful we can become.